Today's show, Utah looks to become the first state to run a digital ID. Now, don't get confused with the launching of what we've seen in some states where there's a digital license available for people to use as their actual license in their digital wallet. I know a lot of it can sound confusing with the real ID, with the digital license, but this specifically is a digital ID, and this is the first we're hearing getting approved in the United States of America. And it's important to pay attention to this on a state level versus a national level, because I've been warning about this herding mechanism in America, where they are going to make red and blue states, and they are going to make your life so miserable that you will have to move to one of these states based on your politics or your ideologies. For example, there'll be states that are pro-vaccine, that will have vaccine mandates, which are obviously going to be blue states, states like New York and California, which is why you see Florida pushing back against any type of vaccine whatsoever, making it a welcoming place for people who are anti-vaccine. That's why you're seeing a lot of the stuff going on with the Roe v. Wade. That was the point of it. There's going to be states that full out ban abortions, which would make liberals not want to live in those states. There's going to be states that obviously ban gay rights and gay marriages, which would make gay people and liberal people not want to live in those states. Everything you see going on in New York right now, with the race for mayor in New York, where they're literally going to put in a guy who is openly a socialist, who is looking to turn it into a socialist state. These are all things they're doing by design, and they've been doing it since COVID. And Utah, it looks like it's going to be a test run here for the digital ID. Now, they've wanted the digital ID since September 11th. We had Larry Ellison of Oracle, who is going to play a pivotal role in all of this and is playing a pivotal role in the UK, which I'll get into momentarily. But they've wanted it really since September 11th. They've talked about it then, but first they needed to pass the Patriot Act. But since then, we've seen pandemics like COVID. The purpose of COVID was more than just depopulation. It was more than just getting nanotechnology inside of people's bodies. It was about a digital passport. Remember, they were talking about the COVID passport so we could track and monitor who's been where, who has what, social distancing, contact tracing. All of that stuff was to try to scare you into wanting a digital ID. But it didn't. It didn't work. So we saw the government do what? Pivot. All the governments working together, because now all of a sudden, all the governments who once had a COVID problem now have an immigration problem, right? Which is why you constantly saw on the news every single day for 4 years images from the border of all these people getting through illegally, nobody stopping them from crossing the borders, getting you in an outrage over how Democrats were allowing them in, then them telling you that these people were voting without being actual U.S. citizens, telling you that your elections could possibly be ruined because of people who don't live in America who are voting for Democrats because the Democrats are letting them in. This is all psychological. It is a psychological operation to convince you into a digital ID. Let me show you what's going on in Utah and listen to how they try to convince you, because one of the other things they've done over the last 4 years or so has been about having your identity stolen online. People pretending to be somebody that they're not online. You think you're talking to someone, but you don't know who you're talking to online. You think you're talking to grandma, but it's really not grandma. You're sending money to somebody who's pretending to be somebody who they say they are, but they're not really. They're over in a cave somewhere or in a factory in Russia. This is all part of the SAP. So this is what's going on in Utah.
A big change could be coming to how you prove who you are. Utah State is considering rolling out a digital ID to help prove who you are in your online dealings. But with data breaches on the rise, Jim Spiewak asks if this can be a game changer for your online safety and security.
Everyone is born with identity.
You control your identity. You should control your digital identity.
Christopher Bramwell, Utah's chief privacy officer, is leading the state's effort to create a state-endorsed digital identity system, which would provide residents with a verified digital credential proving they are who they say they are.
So someone being able to pretend that they're me probably wouldn't happen. The whole point of state-endorsed digital identity is to give you control of your identity so nobody can impersonate you.
Bramwell sees initial uses for digital identity for things like going through TSA or verifying identity for government services. But he also says demand is growing in the private sector.
Why wouldn't you just use an identity you control to log into services and you don't have to worry about reset passwords.
Bramwell says once you receive your credential, the state won't know when you use it and it won't be tracked, but it would be stored securely in something like a digital wallet.
What do we tell people about why this will be secure? The security is our top priority, but most importantly, how do you recover when there's a security breach without having to do reissuance of identity to everybody in the state?
Utah lawmakers passed Senate Bill 260 this year, which laid the baseline policy that gives individuals the right to digital identity, but not a mandate to opt in. Senator Kirk Cullimore was the bill's sponsor.
Everything is digital now. A lot of what we do, even in interacting with the state, is digital.
With AI advancing rapidly, Cullimore believes many technologies will soon require state endorsement.
Do you feel confident that what is in policy right now as we start to build this out is the most safe and secure? The laws and the parameters to establish its safety and the security and the principles of freedom surrounding that are getting put into place.
Jim Spiewak, KUTV 2 News.
So, of course, they tell you everything is safe, everything is secure, nothing is mandatory, right? Everything will be secured in a digital wallet. But what they really don't tell you is that all these data centers, why they're rushing to get these data centers up, is because they don't want you to realize what these data centers are for. Everything that's going to be stored in these data centers is every single thing you do online and every single movement you make in the physical world. Everything is going to be recorded by CCTV footage and everything is going to be put into these databases. They're going to watch and monitor everywhere you go and put it inside of these databases that are going to have your own personal digital footprint. And when the climate laws come into play, well, things will just get worse and worse and worse, as I'll show you right now. So one of the things they talk about, again, is being impersonated online. I just covered this at the United Nations where they were talking about AI governance. They had this shill actor, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who was a child actor in Hollywood, which tells you all you need to know about being groomed, because all these actors in Hollywood who start off as children are groomed, and of course end up becoming spokespersons for the United Nations, like Leonardo DiCaprio, or some of these other child actors that we've seen over the years. But listen real quick to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, again, talking about how important it is for you. Your digital self should belong to you. And this, again, plays into the digital ID.
I know a lot of you here probably have a lot of good ideas about how to govern AI. I'll briefly mention the specific idea that I'm here to talk about. I'm going to dive more deeply into it later. And that's the basic principle that your digital self should belong to you. That the data that humans produce, our writings and our voices and our connections, our experiences, our ideas, should belong to us. And that, yeah, thanks.
So your digital self will belong to you, as if it doesn't already. These are coming from all different angles. They're trying to hit you in the head and pummel you with this notion of every single thing that they possibly can to get you convinced that you need a digital ID and it's for the betterment of humanity. And they started off by telling you that you can opt in and you don't have to be a part of this because that's part of the game, until, of course, you get phased out and forced in. Just like how they don't even talk about how, well, a digital ID, well, what if you don't have a cell phone? Well, nobody does. There's people out there, you have to. Well, this will just force people out there who don't have cell phones, because not every single human being has one, believe it or not. There's a lot of people who are off grid who do not have cell phones. Well, they'll force them into getting a cell phone, almost like people who had flip phones. They were forced into getting smartphones. They will phase people out and they will force people in. And once they do that and say, well, you got to have one now, you got to have a digital ID now, we're getting rid of the physical ID, we're getting rid of everything physical, and we're doing everything digital. Then it turns into what we're seeing in the UK, where they say it's as simple as that. If you want to work in the UK, you'll have to have a digital ID.
You will all have issues in your own countries. But in Britain, it's illegal migration. And I suspect that may be the same in a number of other countries. For too many years, it's been too easy for people to come here, slip into the shadow economy, and remain here illegally. Because, frankly, we've been squeamish about saying things that are clearly true. It's not just that it's not compassionate left-wing politics to rely on labour that exploits foreign workers and undercuts fair wages, but the simple fact that every nation needs to have control over its borders. We do need to know who is in our country. Our immigration system does need to be fair if we want to maintain that binding contract that our politics is built on. Otherwise, it undermines trust, undermines people's faith that we're on their side, and their belief that the state can and will work for them. And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free-of-charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that.
And then from there, when they tell you, well, you can't work without a digital ID, guess what will be next? Well, you won't be able to buy or sell or have food to eat. In fact, you won't be able to come and go as you please because it'll look a lot like life in China, right? Even school children in China using biometric digital IDs, forced to enter and exit the school by using biometrics, forced to use biometrics to buy their own lunches. So then you ask yourself, well, when the world looks like that and children are forced to use biometrics to go into school and exit school, think about everything else in life. Think about you going and traveling, you getting on a bus, you getting on a train, you getting on an airplane, right? Then suddenly you start thinking to yourself, that doesn't look so fun. Life in China doesn't look so great, does it? And then you start looking at what could possibly happen if they implement a social credit system like they have in China, because that's what the plan is for the world, to have a social credit system. And that social credit system will be tied into your carbon footprint. So your behavior, where you shop, how you shop, will all be tracked by Big Brother. And of course, they'll use things like they do in China. You'll be shamed if you have a low social credit score. They'll put your face on billboards saying that you're not a good person. And the sheeple will mock you and come after you because they're under severe mind control. And of course, from there, you won't be able to board a bus or do certain things once your digital ID is in place, unless, of course, you decide to bend over for Big Brother. And no matter what Big Brother asks, you have to agree. If Big Brother comes to your front door and says they want to spend the night with your 3-year-old, you're supposed to say yes. And if you complain online about it, or you complain to others about it, because even if you're in the physical world complaining to people, they'll be listening because the tracking surveillance is everywhere. The listening surveillance is everywhere, whether it's a Alexa in your home or you're out in public and it's some type of recording monitor that's on a street lamp. They'll be listening to you. And if you complain about Big Brother coming to your door to sleep with your child or do as they please with you, well, you'll be locked out of your bank account, you'll be locked out of traveling, and you'll be mocked in public, just like this in China.
They're constantly monitored by facial recognition cameras that are able to instantly put a face to a name. Now, the Chinese are also ranked, given a mark out of a possible 950 points. A score in the 700s is considered good. Around the 500 mark is not. For now, the number is a sort of bank credit rating, keeping track of everyone's spending habits.
I think being ranked is a good thing. A society has to have rules.
It forces us to be well behaved.
It may seem scary, but it's just like that here. We're used to it, and anyway, we don't have a choice.
But in an effort to keep all of its subjects in line, Beijing is taking the system a step further in 2020. It's aggregating data gathered by banks, private companies, and the state to rate if someone's a good or bad citizen.
By using the most data possible, the so-called big data, the system will play an important role in rebuilding a moral society.
The state will go over every detail of a person's life with a fine-tooth comb. Their financial situation, spending habits, career, even behavior on social media. Criticizing the government online or displaying outward signs of wealth is a no-no. On the other hand, praising the party or giving blood increases your social credit. Xiao Wen-Wang is a model citizen. She lives in Nanjing, a testing ground for social ranking. Married with a child, she has a job in a retirement home, no debts, and she wouldn't dream of jaywalking.
As a good citizen, I respect the rules of the road. If I didn't, I'd lose points on my social credit.
In theory, everything can be taken into account in the social score, even the most innocuous errands like supermarket shopping. When Xiao Wen-Wang makes an electronic payment, her purchases tell the state a lot about her. Buying cigarettes would count against her. On the other hand, nappies show she's an attentive mother. Beer could indicate alcoholism. She'd be better off buying water. In this pilot city of 8 million people, there are only 18,000 model citizens. For Xiao Wen-Wang, there are perks to be had, such as paying half price for the bus.
I get discounts for all public services, even at museums. And the library is free for me, thanks to my score.
A good score brings benefits, but people with low scores lose rights. The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens.
It's a matter of principle. Those people have to be condemned.
Those people aren't honest, so they have to pay the price.
It's only right to pay your debts. You have to blacklist those that don't.
The Supreme Court has created a blacklist for so-called bad citizens, those whose ratings have dropped to zero. On it are companies, but also 23 million people to date. Among them is this journalist Liu Hu. He got a little too close to uncovering corruption among high-profile party members. After being sued for defamation by the subject of a story he'd written, he was blacklisted. But he only realized when he tried to buy a train ticket and was told he was banned from traveling.
That tells me I'm still on the blacklist.
Punished because he's been branded untrustworthy by the state.
Once you're blacklisted, you can no longer get a bank loan, start a business, buy an apartment, or even send your children to a private school.
Liu Hu is among a tiny minority of people who have dared to criticize the system, which some are calling a digital dictatorship.
I worry, because I think many people like me will be deprived of individual freedoms, and all of us will live with restrictions of one kind or another.
After our meeting, Liu Hu learned that his name had been removed from the blacklist, but he still has a long way to go if he doesn't want to languish at the bottom of the social credit hierarchy.
And of course, that's what hell on earth looks like. People will still dismiss it and say, well, Big Brother's never going to knock on your door and ask to sleep with your children. But if you ask a Democrat, would they think that that would be beneath Donald Trump? They'd say, no, I could see Donald Trump doing that, right? And conservatives would go, oh, please. But if you told them that it was Gavin Newsom or Joe Biden, Creepy Joe at their front door, they'd say, oh, yeah, I could possibly see that, right? That's why people need to stop being divided over politics, because it's part of the game, keeping you divided so that you don't see the bigger picture and see what they're trying to do, which is implement this enslavement grid, this digital enslavement grid, which only runs on a digital ID. And this is all about behavioral control, because once the digital ID is in place, they will force behaviors. That's what all of these big tech guys have been talking about, from Larry Ellison at Oracle to Larry Fink to Palantir and Peter Thiel and Alex Karp. They want to control your behavior, and they know the only way they could do that is with a digital ID, because they're going to force it, because it's going to force you into compliance. It's going to force you into saying things that you never would have thought in a million years you would say, or agree to things you never would have thought in a million years you would agree to. Why? Because you're going to be slapped on the wrist by Big Brother if you don't. You won't be able to live a normal life. You will have to comply, smile as they kick you in the nuts, because again, it's about behavioral control, and they tell you it, and they tell you they're going to force it. And the only way they can enforce it is with a digital ID.
Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And it's unimpeachable. The cars have cameras on them. I think we have a squad car here someplace. But those kind of applications using AI, if we can use AI, and we're using AI to monitor the video, by the way, and the camera's always on. You don't turn it on and off. And by the way you turn it on, you can't turn it off. I'm going to the bathroom. Oracle, I need 2 minutes to take a bathroom break, and we'll turn it off. The truth is, we don't really turn it off. What we do is we record it so no one can see it, but no one can get into that recording without a court order.
These are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. What we are doing internally is, if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay, you have to force behaviors, and if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. Behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors.
What we do is we use what legal scholars call predicate-based research. So we would look at you, and then we would go out and say, oh, there's lots of different things in your life that may be indicative of someone involved in bad behavior.
Then we were asked if we were willing to supply our product philanthropically, basically for free, and I was very in favor of this because our primary mission is, in fact, to set a global standard for the world for behavior.
Well, we built PG, which single-handedly stopped the rise of the far right in Europe. We built Foundry, which was used to distribute the COVID vaccine and saved millions of lives globally.
Central question, in my view, of civil liberties is how, it's not if the government has data, because let's assume the government has as much data as a health insurance company. It's how is that data being used? Is it being used in a way that's lawful? Meaning, do they have the right to use it? And is it being migrated into places it's not allowed to be used? We allow the enforcement of rules that the government ought to enforce. And by the way, my experience is they want to enforce, or at the very least know they need to enforce. And if it's framed in that way, then you can have what is the ultimate Silicon Valley solution.
So these psychopaths are hell-bent on behavioral control. The only way they'll be able to do it and force behaviors is with a digital ID, because you'll think twice about what you write online underneath people's videos that you agree or disagree with. You'll think twice about who you agree with online and who you disagree with. You'll think twice about what people you condemn. You'll think twice about everything. And instead, you'll just smile as you get punched in the face by Big Brother. You'll smile and you'll take it, because otherwise you won't be able to access your bank account. Otherwise, you won't be able to fly on a plane. And this will all only be allowed. They'll only have this power over us if we allow a digital ID. And that's why the people cannot. Because from there, it gets even worse with the digital ID, because what they really want is everything that Palantir is doing. And that is getting you prepared for predictive policing, because they're going to tell you that AI is going to have the capabilities of telling them ahead of time who's going to be the next school shooter, who's going to be the next terrorist in this country. And people will believe it because people are under hypnosis. They'll say, look, just like the algorithm gives you videos that you don't know why you're getting recommended them, but you say, I like these. Well, that's because the algorithm knows what you like, and the algorithm tells you what you like. They'll say, look, just like that, just like we show you products that we know that you're probably going to like based on the other things that you look at. They'll say, hey, just like that, our algorithms can detect behavior online. People looking at conspiracy sites like a call for an uprising, which of course conveniently they allow now back on YouTube. Why do you think? And other ones that they have allowed back on, because they're going to use all those things. So they're going to have all that data stored on you so that eventually they could say, look, this person online is saying way too many things about the government being bad, about exposing climate change for what it really is. You know what? We're going to arrest them. The algorithm says that they're likely the next person to go and create a January 6th, even though that was as fake as it comes. They're the next person to potentially go and assassinate a president, although that was as fake as it comes. They're the next person to possibly go commit a Sandy Hook, even though that was as fake as it comes. And the people won't care. They'll say, okay, well, at least it's not me getting arrested for predictive policing. And the man will get arrested. It'll likely be someone like me or you, and nobody will hear from us ever again. And the rest of the people will go on living their lives. And then they'll say, you know what? I'm going to think twice about what I look at online, about what I want to question versus what I don't. I'm just going to accept everything they tell me as truth. I'm not going to research anymore. I'm not going to think for myself anymore, because I don't want to potentially get arrested for thinking these things or even being interested in researching these things myself. And all that hell, from a social score to predictive policing, it all comes into play from a digital ID. They're going to threaten you and tell you that you can't work, that you can't bank, that you can't buy or sell. And that's where we need to say, all right, well, guess what? Then we're not going to be a part of your society, just like everybody did during COVID, when they threatened everybody and said, look, this is the way the future is going to be. You're going to be locked out of society unless you're vaccinated. And you know what people said? They held their middle finger up. They said, I don't care. Go ahead. And they saw the actual data, not the data they told you about how many were vaccinated. The actual real data was not anywhere near what they claimed as far as how many people actually went and got vaccinated. So what did they do? They said, well, we can't lose control over them. We can't have them go out and start their own society and leave us out of their society and not allow us to control them anymore. So we're going to pivot. We're going to pivot. And what did they do? They just dropped COVID flat. And instead of them saying, well, we're not going to allow you in our society anymore, they just stopped mentioning COVID and they moved on to what? The immigration crisis. Because they know the only way they could do this to all of us is by having a digital ID. And if it doesn't work with the immigration crisis, guess what? They'll pivot to another thing that they create. Because I'm sure they have a list that they go from 1 to 50 where they say, this is the next one, this is the next one. At some point in time, we're going to convince them that they have to have or need a digital ID. Because I believe what they're doing in the UK, there's going to be way, way, way too much pushback. I don't know if they're going to be able to implement this. I don't know if the people in the UK are going to be on board. And in America, we know certainly that a lot of people won't be. And that's why I think this thing in Utah will come down to a state level. We'll see certain states that adopt it and certain states that don't adopt it. And they'll see and they'll watch the data because that's all that they do. They data harvest and they just look at every single thing we say, every single thing we think. What are people doing? Are people leaving Utah because of this? Are people going to Utah because they want this? And they'll have to pivot and figure out how to maneuver because they know that this is the most needed thing for them to have complete control over the world. This is the new world order. This is AI governance. This is what Trump is bringing in with the data centers. This is what the World Economic Forum has been talking about, the United Nations. It all centers around a digital ID. So expect to see this on a state level. States like Utah, I wouldn't be surprised if they roll this out in California. Extreme liberal states, I wouldn't be surprised if you hear people like Ron DeSantis in conservative states say, absolutely not. We will not allow any of this stuff in our states, to start putting seeds in people's minds that, well, if I go to Florida, I don't have to worry about digital ID. I don't have to worry about mandatory vaccines, right? And people go, well, that's enough for me to go there. I don't have to worry about, and they're not going to kill babies in Florida either. So I'm going to go there. And then they forget, wait a minute, Florida gets hit with the most weaponized weather on the face of the earth, possibly, right? How many hurricanes per year from Florida that's from geoengineering? Pretty much every one. So then you'll be a sitting duck for them in Florida because the people they really want to wipe out are people who have conservative mentalities, are people who, because those are the people who are really more conspiracy theorists aligned. But as we've seen, the majority of these people who are conservative have now fallen into the trap of the conservative party, not realizing it's a fully controlled party. So they're getting fed fake conspiracies that they're actually buying into. But nonetheless, I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing more noise about the digital ID on a state level moving forward, because I think that's how they're going to try to play this out in America, again, with the red states and the blue states, and making them appealing to you versus states that make it so unbearable for you to stay that you would have to actually consider leaving. Like when they tell you, well, you can't work without a digital ID in California or Utah, you'll say, well, then I'll leave because I don't want one. Or they say, not only that, but you also have to get a COVID shot again, or you can't work. Well, then you probably will leave, right? And then, of course, they'll play into the other stuff with the pro-abortion because that's such a big thing for Democrats. So they'll say, I'll leave this conservative state because they won't allow women's right to, they don't respect women, even though it's an insane notion. I'm talking about murdering a baby and women's rights, but nonetheless, they'll leave. Oh, gays can't get married here. They'll leave, right? And then all of a sudden, we can see how this thing actually plays out. And that's why I once had a channel called Herding Humanity, because what you're seeing right now is them herding humanity, herding humans as sheep or cattle, because that's what they view us as, cattle. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.